Hello, today I will be talking about solar energy, and especially photovoltaic or solar cells. So, what these do is they convert the sun's energy into electricity, but it's not that easy. So, these can be found on small calculators or satellites that orbit our planet. What they rely on is the photoelectric effect. This is the ability to emit electrons when light is shown on it. Silicon is a semiconductor. It has some properties that are similar to metals and some to an insulator. This makes it perfect for solar cells. So as we know, sunlight is full of minuscule particles called photons. These radiate through space and come to Earth. It's because radiation is the only form of transfer that works through vacuum. And as these hit the silicon atoms of the solar cells, they transfer all of their energy to some loose electrons from the silicon. It is like the photons are the white balls on a pool table, and they transfer their energy to the color balls. But freeing up electrons isn't the only job they have to do. They also have to put all these electrons together in order to create an electric current. This involves creating a chemical imbalance. This acts like a slope where all the electrons have to go in the same direction. And this is made possible by the structure of silicon, which, if you did chemistry, you might know it's a giant covalent structure, or a lattice. By adding a tiny amount of other elements into silicon, two types are created. The N-type, which has spare electrons, and the P-type, which has missing electrons. Here we can see this is a perfect moment for an ionic bond, but without the metal and the non-metal. So this is about fulfilling the valence ring of an atom. This means that the electrons from the N-type jump over to the P-type. Now the N-type is positively charged, as it has less electrons than protons, therefore making the balance positive. While the P-type will become negatively charged, as it will have more electrons than protons. As we might know, this creates an electric field across the cell. This is possible because silicon is a semiconductor, which maintains the imbalance. And this is how your calculators and satellites work. Isn't that just amazing? So, I'll be talking about tidal here. So, tidal energy is a form of hydropower, which turns energy from tides into electricity. Hydropower is creating electricity with water. So, this energy is not used much right now as it is very expensive, but it will definitely be used more in the future as it is more predictable than wind and sun, as we don't necessarily know how hard the wind is going to blow or when the sun will come out. So, tidal stream generators, which is a form of tidal power, make use of the kinetic energy of moving water to power a turbine. This is similar to wind power. But the most popular kind of tidal is a tidal barrage. So this makes use of the potential energy and the difference of heights between the low tide and the high tide of the water. So the potential energy is caught by a really good placement of special dams. And when the sea level rises and the tide comes in, the water is routed into a basin behind the dam, and then when the tide recedes, it is turned into mechanical energy. And as we have learned before, a generator turns mechanical energy into electricity, which is what we need. So then it goes through a generator, which turns that mechanical energy into an electrical energy, so we can use that power.
Today, I will explain you wind energy. First of all, how does wind originate? The sun heats up the earth. That leads to an increase of temperature. Since water reflects light better than land, the temperature over the water doesn't increase as much as the temperature over land. These different temperatures lead to different air pressures above land and water. Above the land, it gets hotter and a higher pressure is reached than over water. In order to neutralize these pressures, airflow originates. That is what we call wind. If there are windmills in windy areas, the wind hits the wings of the windmill. In order to pass these wings, the direction of the wind changes when hitting the wing. The counterforce of the wind then pushes the wings in one direction. Since the direction towards all the wings are pushed is the same, the windmill starts turning. Then the crankshaft is turning since it is connected to the wings. The crankshaft is connected to a generator which then creates electricity. Today I will explain you hydroelectric energy. First of all, how does water come up to the mountains, where it flows down and can be used to make energy? The sun heats up the earth and oceans. Some of the water in the oceans then evaporates. The water in the air then gets transported by the wind over mountains and land, where it hits the ground in form of rain. Then the water gathers and flows in rivers to the lowest points due to gravity. The lowest points, in this case, are the oceans, where the whole cycle starts again. To create energy, the gathered water is spinning turbines located in rivers. These turbines work very similar to the wind turbines. The water has to push each time one wing of the turbine away in order to pass. Since the water hits only one part of the turbine starts spinning. The crankshaft then also starts spinning, and a generator creates electric energy.
All these events have a common factor: nuclear energy, the energy released from nuclear fissions and nuclear fusions. But what originates all these consequences? First, we need to know how nuclear power works. All power plants heat water to produce steam, which turns a generator to create electricity. In nuclear power stations, that steam is made by the heat generated from nuclear fission. It's when an atom is split, releasing enormous amounts of energy in the form of heat. Uranium-235 is used as fuel because it breaks apart easily when it collides with a neutron. Once that happens, the neutrons from the uranium itself start colliding with its other atoms. This starts a chain reaction. This is the reason why nuclear bombs are so powerful. In a nuclear generator, the chain reaction is controlled by special rods that absorb excess neutrons harmlessly. These control rods are placed next to the fuel rods, which contain uranium fuel pellets. Over 200 of these rods are grouped into what is known as a fuel assembly. When the engineers want to slow down the process, they lower more control rods into the assembly, and when they want more heat, they raise the rods. The United States has two types of nuclear power plants. There are 65 pressurized water reactors and 34 boiling water reactors. Pressurized water reactors use high pressure to keep the water in the reactor from boiling. This allows it to heat to super high levels. The heat is then transferred through pipes to a separate container of water in the generator. It creates that steam that drives the electricity turbine, the water from the reactor that returns to be reheated. The steam from the turbine is then cooled into a condenser, and the resulting water is then sent back to the steam generator. Boiling water reactors, on the other hand, use boiling water to directly create the steam to drive the generator. What is most important is that the entire process takes place in a contained environment in order to protect the outside world from any contamination. This type of energy, however, has a lot of disadvantages. For instance, an accident at a plant could release radioactive material into the environment as a plume of radioactive gases and particles. These particles are then inhaled or ingested by people and animals, or deposited on the ground. The particles are composed of unstable atoms that give off excess energy, called radiation, until they become stable. In low doses, radiation is harmless. After a nuclear meltdown, though, the large doses destroy living cells and can cause mutations, illness, and death. Furthermore, the disposal of nuclear waste is a huge disadvantage as well. Low-level waste comes from contact with the nuclear fuel in day-to-day operations. It is disposed of on-site or is sent to a low-level waste facility in one of 37 states. High-level waste consists of spent fuel. It takes hundreds of thousands of years to deactivate. At the moment, 70,000 tons of this fuel is stored at the power plants themselves. Nevertheless, this type of energy, nuclear energy, has a lot of advantages as well. For instance, nuclear power plants do not emit any greenhouse gases unlike coal and natural gas. They create 0.5 jobs for every megawatt hour of electricity produced. This is in comparison to 0.19 jobs in coal, 0.05 jobs in gas-fired plants, and 0.05 in wind power. The only other power source that creates more jobs per megawatt hour is solar photovoltaic, at 1.06 jobs per megawatt hour. For decades, nuclear power has had the cheapest operating costs, at 1.87 cent per kilowatt hour. It's 68% of the cost of coal, and until recently it was just 25% of the cost of natural gas.